The letter arrived on a quiet autumn morning when the sky above the lakeside town looked pale and distant, and the air felt thin enough to break. Streets stayed empty longer than usual. Dry leaves moved slowly along the sidewalks. Neon signs inside small diners flickered awake one by one while the rest of the town remained half asleep. Inside a narrow brick house near the edge of the water, Calder Reese stood alone in the kitchen holding a chipped white mug that had already gone cold in his hands. Sleep had become something fragile for him. Something that slipped away before morning. Something replaced by long hours of silence and memories that refused to fade. The house around him felt too large for one person. Every room carried echoes of voices that were no longer there. Even the smallest sound seemed to travel too far through the empty halls. When he heard the soft metal click of the mailbox outside, he did not react at first. Nothing meaningful arrived anymore. Only bills. Advertisements. Reminders that time continued moving forward even when his own life felt frozen in place. But a strange tension filled the air. A quiet pressure that made the moment feel different from every other morning before it. He set the mug down carefully and walked toward the front door with slow, uncertain steps, as if rushing might somehow change whatever waited outside. The mailbox lid was still swaying when he reached it. Inside rested a single envelope. No bright company logo. No printed address. Only his name written in dark uneven ink. Calder Reese. The handwriting did not belong to anyone he recognized. Yet something about the shape of the letters stirred a faint unease deep inside his chest. For several long seconds he only stared. Then he noticed the stain along one corner of the paper. Dark brown. Almost black. Soaked into the fibers as if it had dried there long ago. His fingers tightened around the envelope without meaning to. Because some colors never leave a person once they have seen them too closely. And dried blood always looks darker than people expect. The street behind him remained silent. No passing cars. No footsteps. Only the distant whisper of wind pushing leaves across empty pavement. He turned the envelope over slowly. Still no return address. Still nothing except his name. A cold heaviness spread through his stomach. 3 years had passed since the night everything in this town changed. 3 years since the case that never found an answer. 3 years since silence settled over the lake like fog that refused to lift. And now this. He carried the envelope back inside but remained standing at the kitchen counter listening to the faint ticking of the wall clock. Each second sounded louder than the one before, as if time itself were watching. He tried to convince himself the letter meant nothing. A mistake. A cruel joke. Someone trying to reopen wounds that had never fully closed. But his hands trembled slightly and would not believe the lie. Carefully he opened the envelope. Inside waited a single folded sheet of paper marked by the same dark stains smeared near the edge like something touched in haste. For a moment he could not unfold it. Because somewhere deep within he already understood that whatever message waited inside would pull the past back into the light. Finally he opened the page. Only one line had been written. You missed something that night. No signature. No explanation. Nothing else. Just those words resting in silence. Calder felt the air leave his lungs slowly as if an invisible door had closed around him. Outside a truck moved along the distant road, its tires whispering against the asphalt, yet the sound felt far away from where he stood. He read the sentence again. You missed something that night. 3 years earlier detectives had searched everything. Rooms. Fields. Miles of forest roads stretching beyond the town. They had questioned neighbors and strangers and travelers who barely remembered passing through. Every lead had faded. Every theory had broken apart. And still the truth never came. The town tried to forget because people always try to forget pain that has no clear ending. But forgetting is not healing. It is only silence wearing a different mask. Calder folded the paper slowly, his movements careful as if the fragile sheet carried more weight than it should. Memories pushed forward without warning. Flashing red and blue lights reflecting across black water. Cold wind cutting through the dark. Voices speaking in low urgent tones. And the terrible feeling that something important had slipped past everyone unseen. He had lived with that feeling every single day since. Now the letter had given the feeling a voice. From the living room an old television sat dark beneath a thin layer of dust. Months had passed since he last turned it on. Noise had become harder to bear than silence. Yet this silence felt different. This silence felt alive. He walked toward the window and looked out at the long road leading away from town where pale trees lined the highway stretching toward distant hills. Every year, people left searching for brighter cities and warmer lives and louder futures. Calder had stayed. Some believed he stayed out of loyalty. Some believed he stayed out of guilt. Most people chose not to speak about it at all. Because everyone remembered that night even when pretending not to. The night the water turned black beneath police lights. The night a life disappeared without leaving answers behind. The night questions began that never stopped asking. And Calder Reese had been the last person to see her alive. The thoughts settled over him again, heavy and familiar. He closed his eyes briefly, but the memory remained sharp. It always did. A quiet creak moved through the floorboards as the old house shifted in the morning cold. For a heartbeat he almost imagined footsteps behind him. But he lived alone. He had lived alone for a long time. Still the feeling of being watched refused to disappear. He looked down at the folded paper resting in his hand. You missed something that night. If the message spoke the truth, then the past was unfinished. If the message was a lie, then someone wanted the past opened again. Neither possibility offered peace. Across town the diner filled with early voices. Coffee poured into thick cups. Small conversations about weather and football and ordinary worries drifted through warm air. Normal life continued because it always does. But inside the quiet brick house near the lake something had changed. A silence had cracked open. A question had returned. Calder placed the letter on the kitchen table and stepped back slowly as if distance might make it less real. It did not. Because beneath years of regret and exhaustion, a fragile spark had begun to move inside him. Hope and fear often feel the same in the beginning. If there truly had been something he missed, if the truth had waited hidden all this time, then maybe the story was not finished. But truth always carries a cost. And some secrets protect themselves with shadows that never fade. Wind pressed gently against the windows. Far away a train horn echoed across the valley, low and lonely. Morning light crept across the kitchen floor until it touched the edge of the bloodstained page. Calder watched the thin line of sunlight rest against the dark mark. 3 years of silence. One unanswered question. Who had sent the letter? And what secret had frightened detectives enough to let the case disappear into darkness? He did not know yet. But for the first time in years the past was calling him back. And this time, it would not let him turn away. For a long time Calder did not move. The kitchen felt suspended between past and present, as if the air itself were waiting for him to decide something he did not yet understand. The letter remained on the table. Silent. Heavy. Impossible to ignore. Outside the morning slowly grew brighter. Cars began to pass along the distant road. Somewhere a dog barked once, then stopped. Ordinary sounds returning to a town that preferred ordinary days. But nothing inside Calder felt ordinary anymore. 3 years of quiet routine had taught him how to avoid certain thoughts. How to walk through each day without looking directly at the memory that followed him everywhere. Now that careful balance was breaking apart. He picked up the letter again and studied the handwriting more closely. Uneven pressure. Certain letters pressed too hard into the paper. Others faint as if written by a shaking hand. Not rushed. But not calm either. Someone had taken time to write this. Someone who wanted the message understood. Someone who believed the past was still alive. A slow unease settled deeper in his chest. Because only a few people still cared about that night. And even fewer would dare reopen it. His eyes drifted toward the hallway leading to the back of the house. At the end of that hallway stood a closed door he rarely touched. A room preserved in stillness. A room holding the last ordinary moment before everything changed. He looked away quickly. Some memories feel dangerous even in daylight. Instead he reached for his keys resting beside the sink. The metal felt colder than it should. For 3 years he had avoided returning to certain places around town. Places filled with questions. Places where silence felt louder than sound. But the letter had already pulled him back. Whether he wanted it or not. Minutes later his truck rolled slowly through the quiet streets. The town looked the same as always. Paint fading on old storefronts. Flags moving gently in the breeze. People stepping into bakeries and hardware shops beginning another normal day. Normal had become the town favorite illusion. As he passed the small public park near the center square, a memory surfaced without warning. Yellow police tape tied between trees. Reporters speaking in low, urgent voices. Neighbors standing in tight circles pretending not to stare. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel and kept driving. The lake appeared ahead through thin rows of trees. Dark water stretching wide and calm beneath the pale sky. From a distance it looked peaceful. Almost beautiful. Up close it felt different. He parked along the gravel edge where the search teams had gathered years earlier. For a moment he stayed inside the truck listening to the quiet engine ticking as it cooled. His heartbeat felt louder than the wind. Nothing had changed here. No sign of what the water had taken. No mark showing where hope had slowly disappeared hour by hour. Only stillness. He stepped out and walked toward the shoreline. Cold air carried the faint scent of wet earth and fallen leaves. The same scent from that night. The same silence. Memory did not ask permission before returning. Flashlights cutting across the dark surface. Voices calling a name into empty distance. The terrible understanding growing with every passing minute. And Calder standing there believing it could not be real. Believing she would answer. Believing the night would end differently. But morning had come without answers. And morning had never truly ended since. He stopped a few feet from the water. Small ripples moved across the surface, slow and steady. Indifferent to everything that had happened here. You missed something that night. The words echoed again inside his mind. If something had been missed, then it had been missed by everyone. Police. Divers. Search teams. Detectives who worked until exhaustion erased certainty. Unless the message meant something else. A detail ignored. A truth hidden. A person never questioned closely enough. A faint sound of tires on gravel pulled him from the thought. Another vehicle approached slowly and stopped several yards behind his truck. Calder did not turn immediately. He already felt the weight of being watched. After a moment a door opened. Then closed. Footsteps moved across gravel, careful and unhurried. Only one person in town walked like that. Measured. Patient. Carrying years of unfinished work. When Calder finally turned, he saw Eloan Pike standing a short distance away, hands resting inside the pockets of a dark coat. Her hair showed more grey than he remembered. Her expression unchanged. Calm on the surface. Sharp beneath. She had been one of the lead detectives 3 years ago. One of the few who never pretended the case was simple. And one of the last to leave the shoreline the morning hope finally faded. For a brief moment neither of them spoke. Too much history stood between simple words. Eloan's gaze shifted from Calder to the water, then back again. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. "You got one too." Calder felt a chill move through him that had nothing to do with the cold air. Without speaking, he held up the folded letter. Eloan nodded once as if confirming something she had already feared. Mine came before sunrise. Same handwriting. Same message. Silence returned heavier than before. If more than one letter existed, then this was no prank. No random cruelty. Someone wanted the past reopened for both of them. Why now? Calder asked softly. Eloan looked toward the lake before answering. Because something changed. Or someone is afraid it will. Her words settled like stones in still water. For 3 years the investigation had remained officially open but untouched. Files gathering dust. Evidence boxed away. Questions left waiting. Most people believed the truth was gone forever. But detectives learned to recognize timing. And this timing meant something. "Did you tell anyone?" Calder asked. "Not yet," she said. "I wanted to see if you would come here." A faint, uneasy understanding passed between them. Because this shoreline had been the center of everything. The last place certainty existed. The place where answers should have been found. Wind moved across the water, lifting small waves that faded quickly against the rocks. Eloan stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly. "There is something else," she said. Calder felt tension return instantly. What? She hesitated only a moment. Last week evidence storage requested access to the case files. No clear reason. Just paperwork that did not make sense. His pulse quickened. Who requested it? That is the problem, she replied. The name was missing. Silence closed around them again. Missing names. Blood-stained letters. Messages about forgotten truths. The past was not only returning. It was moving. And movement meant danger. Calder looked out across the lake once more. 3 years ago he had believed the worst moment of his life happened here. Now he was no longer sure. Because unfinished stories rarely stay quiet forever. And whatever secret had slept beneath this water, someone had just tried to wake it. Far across the surface a single dark shape drifted near the center of the lake, barely visible against the reflection of the sky. Calder narrowed his eyes, trying to understand what he was seeing. Not a boat. Not debris. Something else. Something that had not been there before. A slow, uneasy feeling spread through him. Beside him, Aloan had gone completely still. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. That was not there yesterday. Cold realization moved through the silence between them. The letter had said something was missed. And now, for the first time in 3 years, the lake was offering something back. For several seconds neither of them moved. The dark shape resting far out on the lake seemed almost unreal, as if it belonged to a memory instead of the present moment. Wind pushed faint ripples across the water, but the object did not drift away. It remained there, quiet and patient, waiting to be noticed. Calder felt a slow pressure building behind his ribs. The same pressure he remembered from that night. The feeling that something important was about to happen and nothing could stop it. Aloan stepped closer to the shoreline, her eyes fixed on the distant shape. Her voice stayed low and controlled, but tension lived beneath every word. We need a closer look. Calder nodded once, though a part of him wanted to turn away. 3 years of silence had taught him how dangerous hope could be. Still, his feet carried him toward the small wooden dock that stretched a short distance into the lake. Each step sounded too loud against the quiet morning. Each breath felt heavier than the last. At the end of the dock, an old emergency rowboat remained tied where search teams had left it long ago. Faded paint. Rope worn pale by weather. A silent reminder of nights filled with questions. Aloan untied the rope without hesitation. Her movements carried the calm certainty of someone who had spent years walking toward difficult truths. Calder stepped into the boat after her. The wood shifted beneath their weight with a low, tired creak. For a moment neither of them spoke. The distance between shore and water suddenly felt larger than it looked. Then Aloan pushed them away from the dock and the boat drifted slowly forward. Calder moved across the open lake, carrying the deep, still smell of water and fallen leaves. The town behind them grew quieter with every yard of distance. Calder kept his eyes on the dark shape ahead, afraid it might disappear if he looked away. Memories tried to return again. Flashlights. Voices. The endless waiting. He forced himself to stay in the present. The boat moved slowly, cutting a narrow path through the water. Small waves touched the sides with soft, hollow sounds. As they drew closer, the shape became clearer. Not debris. Not driftwood. Something wrapped in dark plastic, half floating, half sinking just beneath the surface. Calder felt his stomach tighten. Beside him, Aloan stopped rowing. The boat rocked gently as silence closed in around them. For a long moment neither of them reached forward. Because both understood what waited inside shapes like this. Both understood how easily hope could turn into something else. Finally Aloan leaned forward and caught the edge of the plastic with one careful hand. The material was tied with thin cord darkened by water. Heavy enough to sink. Light enough to remain seen. She looked once at Calder. Not asking permission. Only sharing the weight of the moment. Then slowly she pulled. Water slipped away from the plastic surface in thin streams. The bundle rose inch by inch from the lake, as if the past itself were being lifted into daylight. Calder felt his heartbeat echo in his ears. Loud. Unsteady. Impossible to ignore. When the bundle cleared the surface completely, Aloan drew it into the boat and laid it gently between them. Neither of them spoke. The lake around them stayed perfectly calm. Too calm. With slow, careful fingers, Aloan untied the cord. The knot loosened easily as if it had not expected resistance. She peeled the plastic back just enough to see inside. Then she stopped moving. Calder saw the change in her face before he saw the object itself. A stillness sharper than shock. A silence filled with recognition. "What is it?" he asked quietly. For a moment she did not answer. Then she folded the plastic open the rest of the way. Inside lay a small metal box no larger than a book. Edges rusted slightly from water. Surface scratched but intact. Calder stared, unable to understand. Evidence boxes from the original search had all been catalogued. All removed. Nothing like this had ever been reported. Aloan touched the lid gently as if afraid it might vanish. "This was not in the files," she said. The words felt heavier than the lake around them. If the box had been hidden here 3 years ago, then someone had known more than they admitted. Someone had chosen silence. Calder felt a slow chill spread through him. "You think this is what the letter meant?" Aloan did not answer immediately. Instead, she opened the metal latch. The sound was small but sharp in the open air. Inside the box rested several items sealed in clear plastic. Protected. Preserved. Waiting. A folded photograph. A thin silver chain. And beneath them a second envelope marked by the same dark brown stain as the letter from this morning. Calder felt the world narrow around the sight. Because he recognized the photograph even before lifting it. A picture taken beside this same lake on a summer evening long before everything changed. 3 figures standing close together, smiling toward the camera. Light warm. Future untouched. Himself. Aloan. And the missing girl whose absence had never stopped echoing through this town. His hands trembled slightly as he lowered the photo. The silver chain beside it carried a small pendant shaped like a crescent moon. He remembered that too. She wore it every day. Said it helped her feel guided in the dark. The chain had never been found during the search. Until now. Silence pressed tightly around the boat. Proof that something had been hidden. Proof that the past had not told the truth. Slowly Aloan reached for the stained envelope at the bottom of the box. Her fingers paused just above it. "If this was placed here 3 years ago," she said softly, "then whoever sent the letter today wanted us to find it." Calder felt the meaning settle deep inside his chest. Not a warning. Not a threat. A message. But from who? Aloan finally lifted the envelope. Water had not touched the paper. The seal remained closed, waiting for this exact moment. She looked at Calder once more. Ready. He was not. But he nodded anyway. Because some doors open whether you are prepared or not. Aloan broke the seal and unfolded the page inside. Her eyes moved across the words quickly. Then stopped. A shadow of something unreadable crossed her expression. "What does it say?" Calder asked. For a few seconds she remained silent. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded quieter than he had ever heard it. "It is not a confession," she said. "It is a list." "A list of what?" "Names." The single word felt colder than the water surrounding them. Calder felt his pulse begin to rise again. "How many?" She swallowed slightly before answering. 3. The number hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Because the official investigation had never named suspects publicly. Never confirmed clear responsibility. Only questions. Only silence. Until now. Calder forced himself to ask the next question. "Do you recognize them?" Aloan did not look up from the page. "Yes." The quiet answer carried more weight than any shout. Fear moved slowly through Calder's chest. "Who?" This time she did raise her eyes to meet his. And in that look he saw something he had never seen in her before. Not confusion. Not doubt. Certainty mixed with dread. "One of the names," she said, "is someone the town trusts completely." The lake around them remained still. Morning light spreading wider across the water as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Because the truth was no longer missing. It was rising. And whatever secret had terrified detectives 3 years ago was no longer willing to stay buried. Calder felt the fragile line between past and present finally break. The story had begun moving again. And this time, it was leading somewhere dangerous. The boat drifted in silence while the weight of the names settled between them like something alive. Calder felt the world tilt slightly as if balance itself had shifted beneath the surface of the lake. For 3 years the town had lived inside uncertainty. Questions without direction. Grief without a place to rest. Now the truth was no longer distant. It was written in ink, folded inside trembling hands, waiting to be spoken aloud. Aloan kept her eyes on the page as though looking away might change what was written there. Morning light spread slowly across the water, touching the metal box that photographed the silver chain. Every lost piece returned at once. Calder tried to steady his breathing, but the air felt too thin. "Say them," he whispered. The words barely crossed the space between them. Aloan did not answer immediately. Her silence was not hesitation. It was preparation. Because once a truth is spoken, it cannot return to hiding. Finally, she lifted her gaze. "The first name you already know," she said quietly. Calder felt a pulse of dread move through him. Not because he understood, but because part of him already feared the answer. She spoke the name. Rowan Hale. The sound of it seemed to vanish into the open, yet its meaning struck with force. Rowan Hale was not just another face in town. He was trusted. Respected. The owner of the repair garage near the highway. The man who fixed engines for families who could not afford new cars. The man who brought food to neighbors during winter storms. The kind of person no one questioned. Calder's mind struggled to connect the gentle public image with the darkness of the lake. "That makes no sense," he said softly. Aloan nodded once. "I know." Her voice carried no argument, only quiet certainty. "The second name," she continued. "This one was never in any report. Never questioned officially. But I remember the night clearly." Calder felt the cold return to his hands. She spoke again. Marin Solis. A distant memory surfaced. A woman who had passed through town only weeks before the disappearance. A traveler staying in a rented cabin near the forest road. Someone polite. Forgettable. Gone before anyone thought to look closer. Calder's thoughts raced trying to understand the connection. Why would a stranger matter? Aloan's eyes returned briefly to the page. Because she was not a stranger. Not really. The quiet answer opened another space of fear. Calder swallowed slowly. And the third name. This time Aloan did hesitate. Not from doubt, but from the weight of what waited next. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded lower than the wind. "The third name is yours." The lake fell completely silent. Calder felt the words strike somewhere deep and hidden. A place he had spent 3 years refusing to look. For a moment he could not breathe. Could not think. Could not understand how sound itself still existed. "That is impossible," he said. The denial came quickly, almost without control. "I was there searching. I was the one who called for help." Aloan did not argue. Her calm remained steady. "I know what you did that night. But this list is not saying you caused her death." Calder's chest tightened. "Then what is it saying?" Aloan looked back down at the letter. "It says these are the 3 people who knew the truth before the water took her." The meaning unfolded slowly, painfully. Not killers. Witnesses. People who understood something others did not. Calder's thoughts fractured, trying to reach a memory just beyond sight. "I never knew anything," he said. His voice sounded distant even to himself. Aloan studied him carefully. Not with suspicion, but with the careful focus of someone searching for a missing piece. "Memory hides when fear is close," she said softly. "Sometimes it waits years before returning." Wind moved lightly across the lake, carrying a faint chill. Calder closed his eyes. Not to escape, but to search. Fragments drifted upward. Broken images without order. Laughter near the shoreline. The silver pendant catching sunset light. Footsteps moving away from the dock. Voices arguing somewhere beyond the trees. His heartbeat grew louder. There was something else. Something he had buried because it made no sense. A sound in the dark. Not water. Not wind. An engine starting far too late at night. His eyes opened suddenly. "The repair garage," he said quietly. Aloan watched him without speaking. Rowan was working late that night. He told me the next morning his lights stayed on because of an emergency repair. Aloan nodded slowly. That statement was never verified. At the time it felt unimportant. Calder's pulse quickened. And the traveller. Marin. Aloan's gaze sharpened. Her cabin rental ended the same night. She left before sunrise. No forwarding address. No reason given. Pieces began aligning with quiet, terrible precision. Calder felt the truth moving closer. Not sudden. Not loud. But unstoppable. Why send the letter now, he asked. Aloan folded the page carefully. Because one of the three is no longer silent. The words carried a new kind of danger. Which one? Before she could answer, a distant sound crossed the water. Low. Mechanical. Growing louder. Both of them turned toward the shoreline. A truck had appeared near the gravel edge where Calder had parked earlier. Even from this distance the shape felt familiar. The engine cut suddenly, leaving only wind and water. A door opened. A single figure stepped out. Too far to see clearly, but close enough to understand. They were not alone anymore. Calder felt a deep instinctive warning rise inside him. "Did you tell anyone you were coming here?" he asked. Aloan shook her head once. No. Silence tightened around the drifting boat. On shore, the distant figure began walking slowly toward the dock. Unhurried. Certain. As if they had known exactly where to find them. Calder's heartbeat pounded harder with every step the figure took. Because even without seeing the face clearly, some recognitions do not need sight. The posture. The movement. The quiet confidence. Rowan Hale never rushed anywhere. Aloan's voice dropped to a whisper. If he is here, then he knows the box is gone. Calder's thoughts raced, searching for escape, for explanation, for anything that made sense. But the lake offered none. The figure reached the end of the dock and stopped. Distance kept the face hidden in shadow. Yet the presence felt unmistakable. A voice carried across the water, calm and steady. You were not supposed to find that yet. The sound confirmed what fear already knew. Calder felt the fragile hope of answers twist into something sharper. Because truth was no longer waiting in silence. It had come to meet them face to face. And whatever secret had slept beneath this lake for 3 long years was about to be spoken in the open air. Whether they were ready or not. The voice drifted across the water, calm, steady, almost gentle. Yet every word carried the weight of 3 silent years. Calder felt something inside him tighten, not just fear but recognition. The sound of a truth that had been waiting longer than he understood. Aloan did not move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the figure at the end of the dock. Her breathing slow, controlled the way it became when danger finally showed its face. Rowan Hale stood in shadow with morning light behind him, turning his outline pale and distant. From far away he still looked like the same trusted man the town depended on. The same quiet neighbor who fixed broken engines and waved to passing children. But distance can hide many things. And truth changes the shape of familiar faces. You should not be here, yet Rowan called again. There was no anger in his tone, only a strange, tired patience. As if this moment had been expected. As if he had rehearsed it alone in silence. The boat rocked gently beneath Calder and Aloan. Water touching wood in slow, hollow rhythms like a clock measuring something larger than time. Aloan's voice carried back across the lake, low and clear. 3 years is long enough for silence. For the first time Rowan did not answer immediately. Wind moved across the dock, brushing his coat softly. When he finally spoke, his words sounded older than before. I was hoping it would stay buried. Calder felt the sentence settle deep inside him. Because buried things do not stay buried without help. Someone had protected the silence. Someone had chosen it. Why send the letter? Calder asked. His voice rougher than he expected. Rowan's head tilted slightly as if considering how much truth the morning deserved. Because forgetting was becoming worse than the truth, he said. And because someone else was about to speak first. A quiet realization passed between Calder and Aloan. The traveller. Marin Solis. Where is she? Aloan asked. Gone, Rowan replied softly. But not silent anymore. The lake seemed colder suddenly. Even the light felt thinner. Calder's thoughts struggled to keep pace with the shifting meaning. You knew what happened that night, he said. Rowan did not deny it. He simply looked out across the water toward the drifting boat. Yes. The single word carried no defense. No excuse. Only wait. Alowan's next question came carefully. Did you kill her? Rowan's answer arrived just as quietly. No. Wind moved again across the lake. Small ripples breaking the reflection of the sky. Calder searched Rowan's face for deception, but distance and light kept the truth hidden. Then tell us, Calder said. Tell us why her chain was hidden. Why the box was sunk. Why my name is on that list. For the first time, Rowan stepped fully into the morning light. Age showed clearly now in the lines of his face. Not just years, but regret. The slow damage of carrying something too heavy alone. Because you were there before the water, Rowan said. You just do not remember. The words struck like sudden cold. Fragments inside, Calder shifted violently, searching for shape. Rowan continued, his voice steady but filled with something close to sorrow. She came to the garage that night. Not scared. Not running. She came to tell me something. Alowan listened without interrupting. Every detail carving deeper into the silence. What, Rowan asked quietly, was for help leaving town before morning. She said someone had discovered a truth that could destroy more than one life. Calder felt pressure building behind his eyes. A memory still locked just beyond reach. What truth, Alowan asked. Rowan's gaze lowered briefly. She had learned the traveler was not passing through by chance. Marin was searching for someone connected to an old accident near this lake years earlier. An accident never fully investigated. The air seemed to still completely. Calder's heartbeat thundered in his ears. And me, he whispered. Rowan looked directly at him. You were there the night of that accident. You were young. You panicked. No one died. But someone was hurt and the truth disappeared. Memory finally broke open. Dark water. Shouting. Headlights cutting across trees. A fall. Blood on shaking hands. Calder gasped softly as the past returned all at once. I thought she survived, he said. His voice trembling. She did, Rowan answered. But her life changed. And Marin was a sister searching for answers. The lake carried only silence now. Alowan spoke gently. So the missing girl learned this. And wanted to reveal it. Rowan nodded once. Yes. She believed truth should heal, not destroy. She came to me first because she trusted I would help keep everyone safe. Calder's chest ached with the weight of understanding. But she never left town, he said. Rowan's eyes closed briefly. Because someone else arrived at the garage. Someone who feared the past more than guilt. Alowan's voice dropped. Marin. Yes, Rowan said. They argued. Voices loud. Pain louder. I tried to calm them. His breathing slowed as if reliving every second. She ran toward the dock. Not away. Just needing space. Needing air. The memory formed clearly now inside Calder. Footsteps. Crying. The silver pendant catching faint light. I followed, Rowan said. But the wood was wet. She slipped. Hit her head. Fell into the water before any of us could reach her. The truth landed with quiet finality. An accident. Not violence. But fear afterward had shaped everything. We searched, Rowan continued. Dived again and again. But darkness and panic swallowed reason. And when morning came, Marin begged me to hide what happened. Why, Alowan asked softly. Because she believed the past accident would surface. That Calder's life would be destroyed. That no healing would come from more pain. Calder felt tears he had not allowed for years finally rise. So you hid the chain. The photograph. Everything. Rowan nodded slowly. I thought silence was mercy. Wind moved gently across the water as if the lake itself were listening. But silence became a prison, Rowan said. For all of us. Alowan looked down at the metal box resting in the boat. And the letter. Marin sent it before she died last month, Rowan answered. Illness. Time running out. She wanted truth to breathe again. Calder covered his face with trembling hands. Grief mixed with relief, with regret too deep for words. For 3 years he had believed in mystery, in darkness, in something unknowable. But the truth was painfully human. Fear, love, protection, mistake. Nothing supernatural. Nothing cruel. Only people trying and failing to protect one another. What happens now? Calder whispered. Alohan's voice carried quiet certainty. Now the truth is spoken. And spoken truth can finally rest. Rowan remained still at the dock. No attempt to run. No defense left to give. I will tell the town, he said. Everything. Calder lowered his hand slowly. Morning light warming the cold air around them. For the first time in years the lake did not feel like an open wound. Only water. Only memory. Some endings are not loud. Some justice is simply honesty arriving late. Weeks later the town gathered near the shoreline beneath clear autumn sky. No police tape. No reporters. Only neighbors standing close in shared silence. The story was told completely. Without blame. Without hiding. Grief moved through the crowd like quiet wind. But so did something softer. Understanding. A small memorial stone now rests near the dock. Simple. Unadorned. Facing the water she loved. Calder visits often. Not from guilt anymore, but from peace slowly growing where pain once lived. Alohan closed the case with steady hands. Not victory, but truth. And Rowan. He still repairs engines. Still brings food during winter storms. But his eyes carry openness now instead of weight. Because secrets buried in darkness do not protect the living. They only delay the healing. On calm mornings the lake reflects the sky so clearly it becomes impossible to see where water ends and light begins. And in that still reflection lives a quiet reminder. That even the deepest silence can one day break. That truth may arrive late. But when it does, it brings something stronger than fear. It brings the chance to finally breathe again.